Right after the impact, the deck of the HMS Barham was a storm of chaos. Men shouted over the roar of the sea, their voices raw with panic. Water rushed in like a living thing, swallowing everything in its path. The ship groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that cut through the noise. We had 60 seconds, just 60 seconds, to fix this, to stop the inevitable. Hands moved in a blur, pulling levers, sealing hatches, fighting against the weight of the ocean itself. The air was thick with salt and fear, every breath a struggle. Time slipped through our fingers like sand. The ship listed hard, throwing men off balance, sending tools skittering across the deck. Someone screamed an order, but the words were lost in the madness. The water kept rising, cold and relentless. We knew what was coming. We all knew. And then, in one final shuddering gasp, the Barham was gone. But here's what happened in those last desperate seconds. For decades, the truth behind the sinking of HMS Barham was locked away, buried under layers of official reports and whispered rumors. The story we were told never quite added up. How could a ship so mighty vanish so swiftly? Eyewitness accounts spoke of a sudden, violent explosion, but the details were always hazy, as if someone had blurred the edges of history itself. Survivors described a flash of light, a deafening roar, and then nothing but chaos and the cold embrace of the sea. But why were so many records sealed? Why did the survivors' stories seem to shift over time? And what was the government so desperate to hide? The answers, it turns out, were never really lost. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to ask the right questions. The explosion that tore through the ship that night was so violent, so sudden, that many believed it had to be an attack. And in the early days of World War II, the most likely culprit was a German U-boat. These submarines were a constant threat, lurking beneath the waves, striking without warning. They had already sunk countless ships, their torpedoes ripping through hulls with terrifying efficiency. So when the blast came, it was easy to assume the worst, that a U-boat had fired, that the ship had taken a direct hit, and that the enemy had claimed another victim. But was it really that simple? Or was there more to the story than met the eye? Now let's consider another angle. What if the disaster wasn't caused by an external attack at all? Could it have been an internal malfunction? Given the advanced technology of HMS Barham, it's not as far-fetched as it might sound. The Barham was a Queen Elizabeth-class battleship, a marvel of early 20th century engineering. She was equipped with cutting-edge fire control systems, reinforced armor, and powerful turbines that could push her through the water at over 24 knots. But with complexity comes vulnerability. Her advanced machinery, while impressive, was also intricate, with countless moving parts and systems that had to work in perfect harmony. A single failure in the wrong place, a faulty valve, a misaligned gear, even a small electrical short could have cascading effects. And let's not forget the ammunition. The Barham carried massive 15-inch guns, each shell weighing nearly a ton. The handling and storage of these explosives required precision. If something went wrong in the magazines, if a spark ignited the cordite, the result would be catastrophic. The very technology that made her formidable could also have been her undoing. So, was it possible? Absolutely. Advanced systems can fail in ways that are hard to predict. And if that failure happened at the wrong moment, it could explain why the Barham met such a sudden and violent end. You ever wonder if sometimes the truth is just too heavy to carry? Let's talk about Hypothesis 3. Was it a strategic decision to suppress the news to maintain morale? Picture this. It's wartime. The world's on fire, and every headline could either break spirits or keep them fighting. Governments knew this. They had to balance honesty with hope. Back in World War II, for example, news was carefully managed. Leaders feared that if people heard the full weight of the losses, the fear might spread faster than the enemy ever could. Morale wasn't just about feeling good. It was a weapon. If soldiers believed they could win, they fought harder. If families back home stayed strong, they kept the factories running and the letters of support coming. But here's the thing. Suppressing news isn't just about hiding bad news. It's about controlling the narrative. If people only hear about victories, even small ones, they're more likely to keep pushing forward. The cost? Well, sometimes the truth gets buried under the weight of what people need to believe. Was it right? That's the question. But in war, survival often trumps transparency. The Battle of Jutland was the largest naval clash of World War I, a brutal showdown between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet. Over 250 ships and 100,000 men faced off in the North Sea. And in the chaos, HMS Barham stood her ground. She was a Queen Elizabeth-class battleship, fast and powerful, armed with 8 15-inch guns that could strike from miles away. As the battle raged, Barham found herself in the thick of it. German shells screamed overhead, and the sea churned with explosions. She took hits, but her crew fought back with relentless fire, their guns pounding the enemy. The Germans had hoped to lure out and destroy a portion of the British fleet, but Barham and her sisters refused to break. Historians often call Jutland a tactical draw, but the British held the strategic advantage. The German fleet never again risked a full-scale battle, and the blockade that starved Germany into submission remained unbroken. Barham's role was crucial. She survived the fight, her guns still hot, her crew still standing. It was a testament to British naval power and the sheer will of the men who served aboard her. By 1941, the HMS Barham wasn't just facing the old threats of battleship duels like in the First World War. No, this time the danger came from above and below. Aircraft had turned the sea into a shooting gallery, with bombers swooping down before the big guns could even get a bead on them. And then there were the submarines, silent, deadly, lurking beneath the waves, striking without warning. Back in the Great War, ships like the Barham could rely on their armor and firepower. But now? Now, the game had changed. In World War I, naval battles were about lining up the fleet and trading broadsides, like some grand, slow-motion chess match. But by World War II, the rules had been rewritten. The Barham had to worry about torpedoes from planes, about U-boats slipping past her escorts, about the very air turning against her. The old ways of fighting at sea were gone, and the crew of the Barham had to adapt or sink. It wasn't just about who had the biggest guns anymore. It was about who could spot the enemy first, who could move faster, who could strike before they were even seen. The ocean had become a far deadlier place. The truth is, it wasn't just any submarine that struck HMS Barham that day. It was U-331, under the command of Hans Dietrich von Tiesenhausen. They fired 3 torpedoes, and the damage was catastrophic. The explosion tore through the ship, sending flames and debris sky-high. Men scrambled, but there was no saving her. The Barham rolled, capsized, and then, just like that, she was gone. The aftermath was devastating. Over 800 men lost their lives in those few terrible minutes. The Royal Navy reeled from the blow, and the war at sea only grew more brutal. But, for those who survived, the memory of that explosion, the way the ship just vanished beneath the waves, it stayed with them forever. U-331 had done its job, but the cost was immeasurable. I sat down with Mary Thompson, whose grandfather was a sailor on the USS Indianapolis. She told me how her family never really knew what happened to him. The government kept everything quiet, and when the news finally came, it was just a short notice saying he was lost at sea. No details, no explanation, just silence. Then there's James Carter, whose father survived the sinking but came home a different man. He wouldn't talk about it, not even to his own family. James said it was like the government didn't just suppress the news, they suppressed the memories too. The families were left in the dark, and the sailors who made it back carried the weight alone. It's not just about the past, though. When families don't get answers, that pain doesn't just disappear, it gets passed down. Mary said her mother spent years wondering if her husband was still out there somewhere, if maybe the reports were wrong. That kind of uncertainty changes people. And it's not just the Indianapolis. There are so many stories like this, families waiting, hoping, and never getting the truth. The government calls it national security, but for the people left behind, it's just another kind of loss. One they have to live with long after the headlines fade. The search had gone on for decades, but in 1989, the wreck of HMS Barham was finally found, resting deep beneath the waves. It was a solemn discovery, a reminder of the lives lost and the sudden, brutal shift in naval warfare. The mighty battleship, once a symbol of British naval power, had been brought down not by another ship of the line, but by a single well-placed torpedo from a German submarine. The sinking of HMS Barham marked a turning point, highlighting the vulnerability of battleships to submarines. No longer could the great dreadnoughts rule the seas unchallenged. The age of the submarine had arrived, and warfare at sea would never be the same. The sinking of HMS Barham wasn't just another loss in the long, grim tally of World War II. It was a turning point, a moment that forced navies to rethink how they fought at sea. When those torpedoes struck and the battleship rolled over, taking over 800 men with her, it sent shockwaves through the Royal Navy and beyond. This wasn't just about the ship. It was about the vulnerability of even the mightiest vessels in the age of modern warfare. Before Barham, battleships were seen as the kings of the ocean, untouchable giants that could dictate the terms of any fight. But her loss, captured on film as she exploded and vanished beneath the waves, proved that no ship was invincible. The era of the battleship was fading, and the rise of aircraft carriers and submarines was undeniable. Navies had to adapt or be left behind. The sinking also changed how crews were trained and how ships were designed. Lessons were learned the hard way about damage control, about the need for better protection against underwater threats. It was a brutal reminder that war at sea was evolving, and those who didn't keep up would pay the price. Barham's legacy wasn't just in the men who served on her or the battles she fought. It was in the way her loss reshaped naval warfare forever.